Time now to catch up with Russell Brown, the head honcho over at Public Address and also the Media 7 show on TVNZ 7. Morning to you, Russell.
Good morning.
Good morning. And in fact, the Media 7 show is the first thing we're going to be talking about this morning because you are featuring Paul Lewis from The Guardian. You just had pre-recorded an interview with him yesterday.
Well, actually, I did it this morning, but we'll have pictures hopefully coming over on the satellite as we speak. But yeah, I was delighted to get Paul Lewis. I don't know how many other people were following him during the UK riots last week, but he was the Guardian reporter who was basically out there amongst it, reporting on Twitter most of the time.
Right. Okay.
Basically, went out with a notepad, a BlackBerry, and a hoodie. And the hoodie was quite important because he needed to blend in because there were journalists being assaulted and chased. So he basically had to just lurk. But the whole time was filing both reports for the paper and instant reports via Twitter. And the interesting thing about his use of Twitter was he was using it as a two-way channel. So basically he was out there and saying, okay, this is happening here. I have reports that something else is kicking off over there. Can anyone confirm this? How long will it take me to get there? Where should I go? And had literally hundreds of people giving him advice.
So
which is a really...
My question there is, what kind of advantage did he have over, say, a BBC journalist?
Well, the BBC, I think, found it difficult. But if you're wandering around with a TV camera, you make yourself a target, and there were a lot of places that the BBC could not go, and they were actually criticised for that. But you can't blame them.
Yeah.
Whereas working the way that Paul Lewis was, basically he was just some young guy in a hoodie, and was able to be in a whole lot of different places. He also got when he went back, he realised quite quickly, like on the first night when it broke out in Tottenham, that the BlackBerry messages were key to this,
Yes.
and they were what were being used to organise the looting and tell people where to be. And they actually managed to get people to send them in quite a few. And that became an interesting editorial decision in itself, because you think, well, okay, this is actually pretty sensitive. We can't publish this yet. So they had lots of interesting calls on what to publish and when, but did actually end up putting some of them up just to show how explicit a lot of them were.
Yeah.
And these were quite hard initially for the police to access, because it's not like Twitter where everything's completely public. BlackBerry messages are encrypted and can only be read by the sender, basically. And the police in Britain managed to find a way of getting into these. Supposedly hacked it. I think they just found a back door with the assistance of RIM, who run BlackBerry.
Yeah.
But it's a fascinating insight into how and why these things happened. And Lewis was in the middle of it. He's quite an interesting guy, because if you remember 2009, the G20 summit in London, there were protests there that got quite violent.
Yeah.
An old guy called Ian Tomlinson was pushed around by the police, knocked over, and very shortly afterwards died. And the police account of it was nothing to do with us. Paul Lewis received a cell phone video taken by an American hedge fund manager who happened to be in the City of London at that point, went back to New York, had a look at what he'd got, and thought, someone needs to know. So he sent that mobile phone video over to Paul Lewis, which completely changed that whole story.
Yeah.
So, it's fascinating insight into the way that these technologies and platforms and devices are actually driving reporting. And
did he have a view on Cameron's views on these kinds of systems, and about whether or not they should be restricted in the future?
Yeah, he found it quite alarming, as you can imagine, because as he pointed out, he said, look, Twitter and Facebook were used for all kinds of good purposes while this was going on. People being able to warn others not to go places, people being able to tell him where to go to be able to report, and for him to actually be able to report. These were the same technologies he was using to report. So when you're talking about closing down these things in a crisis, which David Cameron and one of his MPs, Louise Mensch, have been doing, you're really taking quite a scary step. It's getting into, the government of Iran type stuff.
Yeah. And talking about the government of Iran, I saw you tweet out a link. Someone was planning some kind of water bomb or water fight, public water fight, and he was arrested. Yeah, tell us about that.
They haven't come to court yet, but they've been charged. Two young guys who used Facebook to organise a water fight. And, of course, there's actually been a big water fight, or several of them, in Iran, which has been considered sort of unseemly behaviour.
Yeah.
People have been arrested. You wouldn't expect that would happen in a Western country, but it has. And they've been charged with planning an illegal activity via the internet. And I don't think water fights are illegal.
No.
But this is the kind of moral panic that Britain is in at the moment, because David Cameron, the Prime Minister, is under pressure for having stayed on holiday too long and not having done enough. So the strong desire there now is to show that they're taking a hard line. But you really have to wonder how sensible it is. The latest one that's just come through this morning is two young guys, 20 and 22, have been sentenced to 4 years for posting messages on Facebook inciting other people to riot.
Wow.
These are in little towns in, I think, Norwich and a town in Warrington.
Where nothing happened.
There was no riot resulting from their messages.
Yeah.
But in a way, when you look at the way the British law works, it treats encouragement to commit a crime as equally serious to committing that crime. So even though they were singularly unsuccessful in inciting riots, they have been sentenced as if there was in fact a riot and they participated, which is starting to get a little bit scary.
It is.
And people are already pointing out many other cases where there's been an incitement to commit a crime that has not been treated in this way. And you kind of wonder whether some of the British judges need to calm down a bit.
I think everyone's getting a little bit excited. Now, I haven't...
Like 15% of rapists in Britain don't get 4 years in jail.
No, that's right.
So,
I haven't heard about this since the riots, but there were some thoughts that the Notting Hill Carnival wasn't going to go ahead. Have you heard anything?
So you have to repeat that.
The Notting Hill Carnival, there were some thoughts that wasn't going to go ahead. Have you heard anything?
Yeah, I haven't seen anything about that. I mean, it wouldn't entirely surprise me. You could see the police might not want the bother, and again, David Cameron wanting to look tough would pretty much, go along with anything in that line. I think it could end up aggravating the problem all over again, though, because there are people quite clearly are starting to wonder, where the hell Britain's going with this now.
Exactly.
Obviously it was traumatic, but maybe there needs to be some sense of measure. So anyway, if people do want to hear the Paul Lewis interview, it'll be and see him. You won't see me. I'll ask the questions afterwards.
Yeah.
On Media 7 tomorrow evening. 9:05 p.m. on TV News 7.
So is that the way it's done? Now we know. We've got the inside ball on some of those satellite interviews and how they're conducted.
Yeah, exactly. Well, cheap ones like we can afford to do.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we were going to cover key and welfare, but I'm sure that one is going to keep around over the next few weeks. So thanks very much, Russell. We'll talk to you next week.
Righto. Cheers, buddy.
See ya.
Bye.
And you can find him over at publicaddress.net.